Welcome, Gunnar Öquist, former Secretary General of this Academy and evaluating the Danish system, as we said. We are supposed to have a conversation.
Okay.
So please.
Thank you.
And the chairs will get filled with other people as we go along. But first of all, I would like to start where Liselott Höjgård ended and with those advice for the Swedish system and what can we really learn from Denmark, do you think? Because apparently we made some other choices where Denmark made their reforms, we did something else. So what do you think we can learn?
Yeah, I think we can learn from Denmark when it comes sort of the linkage between the scientific community and the political part. And I and Mats Bender, we make a comparison of the research system in different European countries in 2012 on behalf of the Academy and supported by the Wallenberg Foundation. It's quite clear that through the years you can identify key actors in the scientific community that has an immense influence on the political decision in order to push the research system in the direction we have heard today. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's actually a starting point, say, 1980, because at that time, Danish science, Danish research had difficulties. It was stagnation. And it was realized, and the politicians listened to this, it was realized we have to step up. We have now to foster a new development into sort of fostering academic excellence in our work. And we have to strengthen our international recognition. And as a response of that, DNRF was founded in 1992. And we have seen the consequences of that. It's interesting to compare with the Swedish situation, because at the same time, the earner wages funds were sort of put to our disposal. But that was not with a focus to foster excellence in international comparisons. It was to do the right things to develop industry and so on. So it was a strategic investment that Sweden did in 1992. Denmark made an investment in academic excellence.
And today the impact factors of Denmark is higher than Sweden?
It's very much higher than Sweden. I'm convinced that we have the best research groups that we have in Sweden are just as good as the research groups that we have in Denmark. But when you do web and science and look at areas that perform above world average and areas that perform below world average, Denmark has more research fields than Sweden that perform well above world average, and Sweden has more research fields that perform below world average. So Sweden is more tolerant to mediocrity than what I think Denmark is.
Tolerant to mediocrity, this is a way of saying that we are too kind, we are too mesiga?
No, I think it has an explanation in the very, very broad mission that our universities have in the högskolesystemet. You know, 55 to 60% of research is externally funded to Swedish university. Instead of having research institutes, we have governmental agencies supporting sectorial research at universities. These agencies, which are important, do an important work, and the research that they support is important, but it has an effect on the universities in the way that lots of money goes to Swedish universities saying, this is so relevant and important, and the science is good enough. Mm. So we have a whole cadre at our universities that use the conceptual thinking of our time to solve problems, rather than challenging new ideas, coming up with new thoughts, and pushing the frontier of science. And of course, this is an issue that our universities have to handle And I don't think they have handled it very well. It has resulted in dysfunctional faculties with faculty members that have different perspectives of what they are doing. And it's very difficult to get grip on these factors that really push for quality. And I would like to say one thing, because science policy has effect over time. And the Danish politicians, they have listened to the Danish advisors. I'm pretty sure of that. They haven't always done what the advisors say, but then there have been influential advisors in the field that have managed to get the thing to develop in the right direction. Remember that it was the Danish minister that brought the issue of an ERC up to the political level. When Denmark had a research conference in 2012, Denmark chose the topic, fostering excellence in science. That was a EU research conference. And there were 5 things that came out of that. It's called the Auris Declaration, and it said, if I remember it, nurturing talents, trust and freedom, long-term perspectives, creative research environments, and beyond and across disciplines. And this was the message that the Danish minister took to Brussels, and I like to think that it had an effect on securing ERC and strengthening ERC within the framework program. This was a political action from Denmark, and I think that tells a little bit about the political situation. Danish politicians have understood what is required in order to foster excellence. And whereas our politicians, they have taken excellence, academic excellence for granted, and said, we want this academic excellence to influence other field of the society. It's a very good thinking, but I think it's gone too far. I think we now need to have a discussion on how to restructure our operational activities in order to secure both top research, international research, as well as the more strategic research and the other tasks that are on the universities today.
And we'll soon talk about more of the roles of the universities. Just to come back on the virtues that Liselott Højgaard mentioned, I think this is the core of why you become a researcher in the first place. You know, what is this? You have mentioned the enjoyment of science and etc.
Why I became a researcher?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was. Yeah, we can hear that too. But I was thinking for the young generation, it's so important that those virtues. And when she called you a classical, she even said old-fashioned. But I stick with the word classical. Have we missed to sort of explain and tell these kind of stories also to our decision makers what it is all about? Have we just concentrated too much on the results of science rather than fostering a new generation of people in society? And in that case, what can be done?
I think that's a difficult question. You know, we have advisory bodies in Sweden also advising the Ministry on science issues and innovation issues. I have been sitting on Forskningsberedningen in the 90s, but my feeling was that we didn't have very much influence. It was sort of political realities that governed the outcome. I think, and Thomas and Liselott may correct me on this, I think when you look at Danish science, you have a better dialogue with your politicians than I think we have. We have a dialogue with our politicians, but somehow they're always overriding things that are important. In Sweden, it has been very much an issue of money, and it has been money to large environments, it has been strategic money, it has been collaboration, networking, and all these kind of things. And the picture I have got is that, oh, you as scientists have to be happy because we give you all this money, and this is what we had, the package we had made in order to get it through the Ministry of Finance for their approval.
It always ends
And
there,
that
doesn't it?
might be true, but I think what we need in Swedish science policy is a concept of ideas. We talk about ideas. Ideas, we have to understand by our heart what is fostering excellence. And I'm happy that we have a research council, Wallenberg Foundation, Riksbankens Jubileumsfond, because they really try to do the best in the situation which we have. And then I think universities can do much better, because that's the weak point in the research system today in Sweden.
Thank you for being so frank with us, Gunnar. And let's invite the other participants of the panel and discuss further. Now we have a few interesting threads to pull here. So please, Mia Phillipson, where are you? I hope your microphone works. Can you start speaking and let's see if it works? I'm so nervous about this audio system.
So it works, yes?
It works, it works. You're a professor in physiology at Uppsala University and also member of the Young Academy. Welcome. And then we have Sven Stafström, Director General of the Swedish Research Council.
Thank
You
you.
can place you there. And then Astrid Söderbergh Widding. There you are. Vice Chancellor, oh no, President it's called, at Stockholm University. Give them all a warm hand. Thank you. We've been discussing now the Danish case, and before that we heard about the ERC, and we heard about the Wallenberg situation, etc. And I would like just a first reaction on all of you first. What we can learn from Denmark, and if you agree on Gunnar's take on this, or what's in your head, Mia?
So when I heard about the Danish story, I was wondering what happened to all these people that were below the world average. Was that the key that they?
What happened to them? Where have you placed them? Yeah, we keep that question to. Perhaps you can have a microphone in a few minutes. Any more ideas from?
Well,
her?
I think that everything that I've heard so far are just pleasant surprises. No, not really surprises, but I agree with everything, more or less.
What do you think is the most challenging part in being a young researcher in the system right now?
Well, for young researchers, it's extremely important to get individual, long-term, and generous funding, so that you can really prove that you're independent, that you can set up your research group, and that you can also choose the research environment that's best for the science. And also, as we heard already many times, the review process is extremely important, especially perhaps so for the young scientists that don't have a strong CV. And then the evaluators, the reviewers, have to have confidence enough to, I mean, it was shocking that
Exactly.
one has to be told to read the applications, right? But
first of all, read it, and then be
read
brave.
it, and then also be knowledgeable enough about the science so that you can really evaluate the ideas.
Thank you. Sven?
First of all, I think it was really interesting to hear about the success from Denmark about these centers of excellence. We've had them in Sweden with the linear centers. We are currently evaluating them, but I'm sure there are things that we can learn from the Danish example. Then there was something Gunnar said, and also Göran touched upon that. When we speak about external funding, sometimes we treat it as one body, but it's not one body. We have external funding of different types. And I think that this is really important to consider, and also to think about the balance between these different types. Maybe we can use, since we have had speakers from Europe here, if you just think about the pillars in Horizon 2020, for instance, excellence pillars, the challenge pillar, and the industrial pillar. We can think about the funding in Sweden, the external funding, and try to map them onto these three categories, and think about, do we have the right balance between these three? I think this is something that can be done easily. I think we can sit together, a few people here, and just do it, and then think about the balance. This is something.
Good.
Perhaps we now should put into when we now give ideas into the next research bill, we can address this question there.
I think they will also like to hear that. I mean, it's in their interest as well. Astrid, your reaction?
Rather than commenting on the specific Danish example, I would rather like to emphasize that I find it quite striking that the same concepts keep coming back in all the three presentations we have heard. Excellence, long-term, freedom, flexibility, trust, bottom-up, transparency, time, security, resources, and also the defense of, whether we call it, the defense of basic science, I would say, but also the concept of ERC, frontier research, which also includes applied science.
Are we too, in Sweden, are we sort of, have we got, I was thinking of risk now, and I'm trying to formulate a question. I actually, from Jean-Pierre Bourguignon, I read a speech you gave last year in Venice, and I would like to just read this to have your comments on it, because it's quite cool, because you said, in a nutshell, the best bets are made when scientists are pushed to the boundaries, when submitting research proposals, and the most competent evaluators are confronted with these challenging projects. That's what we've been talking about. Then, you may have to press them to take on risk, as our community is actually spontaneously conservative and needs to be put outside of its comfort zone to accept some bets. I would like your comments on this comfort zone and how we can promote more risk-taking in the processes. You nod, Gunnar.
Yeah, I think a strength of the Danish system is that you have managed to, you have used the same mechanism as we use in most countries, increase competition for funding in order to foster quality. But in Denmark, you have kept an eye on the balance in the system. Because I think we who work with funding of research, we have to realize our limitations. We can push quality to a certain level with the peer review process and so on. We can take it a little bit longer by investing in people, as Göran said. But what you have done better in Denmark and Sweden is that you lean towards a very important role of the universities, namely to recruit people.
We are still here.
Yeah, to recruit people, to give good career opportunities, to prioritize resources, make strategies at the university level that you implement over time. You have revised academic leadership. Now we have deans and department chairs that work together in order to establish competitive research environments good enough to bring home the big money from DNRF, from the Council for Strategic Research, and from the technology innovation side. So this complementarity of the role of a university and a funding agency has to be there. And this is what we are lacking in Sweden. Universities have become so weakened and their missions so diffused, so there is not enough strength at the university level to take this environmental issue as their core issue that can be fortified by external funders. Astrid?
Well, obviously, I don't agree with what you say, on a quite general level about universities, but still, I think that Liselott Højgaard is right that if Swedish politicians should have something to learn from Denmark, from the Danish example, is not to be too quick to make researchers chase for impact, innovation, and implementation. That this long-term perspective is really important. But I think that this, of course, you have to strike the balance that was in the topic of this panel between faculty appropriations and external finance, but I also think that partly this question is posed in the wrong way, and like in this polarized debate that we have just had in the Swedish press, where they are seen as almost excluding each other. In fact, I think both are important, and the question that should rather be posed is who should do what, which are our respective roles. I strongly believe that universities should be responsible for recruitments. That this means that we need to have sufficient resources to attract excellent scholars, not least young scholars on tenure track, to pay their salaries, to attract, to have attractive packages to both attract them and retain them. And also in the current Swedish system, I think we must mention the huge financing responsibility for research infrastructure that is put on the universities, and for this we need resources to be able to cover them. But universities should never play the role of research councils. Competitive funding, especially for free fundamental research, is absolutely essential for the quality of research to develop and also to secure a broad base for future applications and innovations.
Thank you. Wow. Can you also say something about how you see the balance when it comes to money?
I won't go into percentages. This discussion is...
No percentage.
No.
It's just that...
No, but I think I already said that the universities need to be able to fund the people they recruit. Teachers, professors. I think this is something that universities should do, and also the research infrastructure that the system today requires. And then there should be more competitive funding from... So
then Sven comes in, and the...
Yeah,
the
I agree with Astrid and with Gunnar.
Yeah.
Let's see
wow, you're in the middle there.
But I think, I mean, it's stupid to speak about numbers, at least one number, because if we look at the distribution between, even if you look at big universities in Sweden, I think it goes from something like 80-20 block versus external funding or competitive funding, up to 25-75 for those that have the largest part of external funding. So just looking at one number is, I think, is stupid and misleading in the discussion. I also think that we have to clarify roles. So block funding should be used for long-term cost, salaries of faculty, local infrastructure, etc., etc. Maybe also overhead costs can be part of the block funding. External funding should be for time-limited costs, and also, at least in our case, as we mentioned, that national infrastructure is something I think is best taken care of at a national level by a national funding agency. But then back to I think what Gunnar mentioned is I think it's very important to create some kind of quality culture at the universities. That's actually a phrase I learned from Jens Odderside in Denmark. From a report he presented to me. And that's, of course, very much up to universities, to the faculty, to the staff to create such culture. And I think we lack something there in Sweden. If I look back at my own research career, I've been in Sweden and I was in Belgium and in the US. And I can see some differences, maybe because of individuals, but also perhaps because of differences in culture.
How can this be done? Mia, as you are in the middle of it all, at the university with external funding, how are you affected by this discussion, and what would you like to see?
What do you mean?
I mean, with the universities at one side and the research council and the project money, and how to actually get a more quality, more of high quality research at the universities with money from the whole ecosystem. But how I was just thinking from your point of view as a young researcher, how, if you can just explain the challenges.
Yeah, well, I think as a middle-aged researcher, I think it's very important that I can trust the review process of my grants. And so far, this is something that is not so well established at the universities, I would say. So that's why the external funding agencies are so important. And also, in order to recruit people from abroad,
Of course.
it has to be long-term and transparent and pretty clear
You need
rules
long-term
what's
money
happening.
to be able to recruit, of course.
Yeah, to be an attractive environment. And I think the universities are very much responsible in enabling this, the recruitment, and to make sure that the environment is attractive enough.
But what happens when you attract external money? So you are suddenly quite a rich research group. What is the reaction of the university then, and how does this balance up?
I think the reaction varies a lot between universities in Sweden, unfortunately. And I am fortunate enough to be in Uppsala, where they have reacted positively.
Can we have any comments and questions, please? Yes, the microphone over there.
Thank you for a very nice panel. I'm Kerstin Salin. I'm one of the vice presidents here at the Royal Swedish Academy. I think it was very interesting that we, for once, came into the question of university structure and the allocation of tasks, and also the lack of research institutes of the more applied kind in Sweden, because it's so quiet around those issues in Sweden. How can we bring it up? And can you elaborate a little bit on what that meant for the Danish system when they sort of allocated the tasks much better and merged some of the universities, and that they have a binary system that we don't have?
Yeah. There was a number of reforms made in Denmark. One reformed the Research Council system in 2000, I think it was. You got the Independent Research Council, yes. And then you got the Council for Strategic Research, and then the Danish Foundation for Technology. Yeah, something like that, in collaboration with industry. And when it comes to the NRF, excellence is the guiding target. But this is more anecdotal, of course, but talking to people with a Council of Strategic Research and from the innovation thing, talking to those people, they seem to rely and obey to the same principles of excellence as we see at the NRF. And I think that's one important aspect of this. And now there are other people who want to come in, so maybe I'll stop here.
Yeah, it's fine. I thought we could actually give the word to Liselott Højgaard to comment.
Yeah, the Danish system is with the same principles of peer review and meritocracy, with the basic science, the DNRF, and then the Free Research Council, where it's also the same bottom-up driven applied research programs, and then the Innovation Council now. And then there is, of course, also the very big private foundations, the Novo Nordisk Foundation, the Lundbeck, the Carlsberg, the Maersk, and so on. And I think one of the tricks is that all the foundations, private and public, together with the universities, meet once a year with the minister and have a dialogue. And we meet in advance on our own and try to talk among the scientists, the scientific community first. Because if we have quarrels among us in the groups of funders and universities and scientific community, then the politicians can use it against us. But if the academics are in agreement, then we can reach much further.
Thank you so much. And this was also something you brought up, Göran. Perhaps that was not what you wanted to say now, but a better dialogue and coordination among the funders.
Yeah, we don't have any dialogue in Sweden.
Why can't we?
Well, we have it with VR, but you know, they're under different political parties, under different political or departments, and they have their own agendas. But I would like to bring up another thing. I admire the Danish system. I think as a lot of innovation is coming out from basic science, but I think we are doing a mistake to say that's the only thing. If you look at Swedish society, the development of Swedish industry and energy industry, we are not doing that bad in Sweden. Why are we not doing that bad? The reason for it is that you have innovations created outside of basic science. Stockholm is the hub in Europe for innovations like Skype and Spotify and all these companies that are coming. They don't need basic science. They need the novel business ideas. And I think that we can't sell basic science as the only way to create innovation. If you talk to the people that is now investing a lot in Stockholm in these service companies, they are investing because they are creating excellent companies. And it's about 100,000 jobs created in this region the last 10 years, independent of basic science. And of course, I defend basic science, and I think it's excellent. You can prove a lot, come out of it. But I think we have to balance the debate. I talked a lot to Daniel Ek, the Spotify guy. He survived 4 weeks at KTH, then was fed up with the mathematical courses. But I tell him all the time that he must remember that the company is built by people educated at Stockholm University and KTH, so that we have some type of balance in the discussion how we put basic science in the political context. There are other things that creates innovation.
But should we even talk about basic science in contrary to applied? Isn't that an old discussion? I mean, it's a question of excellent scientific.
We should only talk about good science and bad science.
Exactly. And if we do that, I suppose the industry in Sweden will also like the discussion.
But they don't care about bad science. But Gunnar has a point. We have a bit too much bad science or mediocre science in Sweden. But keep in mind that when the politicians look at innovation systems and you come and say that basic science will solve everything, that's not the case. They look at how many jobs you create, how much money you create, and there are different contributors.
But this next generation thing that Liselott Höjgård brought up is actually a very good argument also for the perhaps not politicians because they are quite short-sighted, but the community as a whole.
I tell you what the main problem in Sweden is. That's our attitude to life. If you listen to a Swede, everything is useless. School is useless. Too many kids in kindergartens. They are not getting enough teaching at the university. And in spite of that, we create talented, mature young people that the companies want to hire. How the hell is that working if everything is so useless? But that's one of the ways we Swedes present ourselves.
And still we top the innovation indexes. So yes. It can't be really the truth. Please, and when you have the microphone, Liselott, can you also comment on what happens to the scientists that don't keep up to the measures that Mia was asking about? Please.
First, about innovation and basic science, applied research. Of course, I'm not against innovation, but it's a question of a balance. If it's skewed to one side or the other, it's wrong. But I think it's important to remember the results of Mariano Mazzucato, the famous professor of economy who has investigated the outcome of the basic science at Stanford and USC. At the Californian universities as the tricks behind the big five in California. I think it's very important to read these reports and say it's the basic science ideas who made Google, Apple, Facebook, whatever. So it's not a question of being against one end or the other, but it's a question of balance of the scales. In Denmark, we have the Innovation Council, which is much bigger than the Danish National Research Foundation. So you need the whole thing. But if you bias towards one end or the other, then it's wrong. Okay. About those who are below average, that's a question of mathematics. If you have a world average and you are above world average, then you will, of course, have fewer below the world average if you are up here. But we don't kill them, those who are not good enough. But I think we try really to also say that it's all right not to do research. So you should only be there if you are good and if you like it, if you enjoy it.
There are other careers. Do you even help them to find other careers?
Yes, there are problems now. There are programs now so that postdocs are given incentives to go out into industry or other areas for work, so that those who are not most eminent scientists, those who should not have a permanent career in science. Then we actually also at our follow-up meetings with the DNRF, it was Thomas Sinkjær, professor and previous director of the foundation, who actually invented this and say, go out early instead of spending your life here and being second class.
They can be servants of science.
No, they can be scientists in a company or they can do something else.
True.
A servant of science is like me when I'm sitting in the foundation.
Yeah, or me. Thank you very much. Then.
I think it's still relevant to separate, at least to some extent, basic and applied science, because from the point of a funding agency and perhaps a reviewer, we have to look at the concept. I mean, that was mentioned by Jean-Pierre. We judge based on scientific quality only, but then you have to define what is scientific quality, and it's not so easy, because then I think the definition is slightly different depending on the type of research that you assess. And when in basic science is, then you create new knowledge by basic science. So then you look at what kind of the step in knowledge that is created. That is, the higher the quality, the higher the step is. And when it comes to applied science, it's something a little bit different. So from the point of view of reviewer and assessment of applications, we need to consider them in a slightly different way.
But before we go to lunch, just to hear a short last comment from you. Is there anything you would like to take from Denmark to actually apply? If it's just one thing, what could that be? Astrid?
No, I'm not interested in. I think we are in Sweden and we have to deal with our own scientific climate. And I strongly agree with Göran, who says that there is too much focus on super scientists, and that it's very important to focus also on the scientific climate and the culture, and also not least at our universities, which have been mentioned several times. So I think not only our recruitment processes, but also our promotion processes, from, for example, assistant to associate professor, it is extremely important to have many good evaluators looking at these applications, to have very thorough processes. And also one thing that we have done at Stockholm University that I think is very important, it is that we now let assistant professors who want to apply for promotion to describe, not only list their most important contributions, but really to take out one single contribution that they judge to be the most important and argue for this. What has it brought to the scientific community? What potential might it have for the future? And this creates also much better process to let the researcher actually reflect. And also I think that it is absolutely crucial to mention this again, that we go back to real peer review and to actually read what people have written, and not only to look at journal impact factors.
Good point there. Sven, do you have a short last word?
Since this is a seminar on assessment, I would like to mention the possibility to do national assessment of research quality science. We have worked on that before at the Research Council, some ideas. Now we are thinking about looking into specific topics to evaluate that at a national level. I think that is something that could add to quality in the system. So national assessments of research quality.
Great. And you will come back in the afternoon in another panel, so we might touch upon that one there as well. Gunnar, I would like to finish with Mia. So yeah, you have...
No, I mentioned that the weak point in the Swedish research systems, that's the universities. And I think...
What do you mean by weak there?
Kerstin had a question on this.
Yeah.
No, I think our university do not take their complementary role to foster excellence at the level we are aiming for now. Okay. And I think that's a deficiency. One leans too much towards external funders. One has to take the responsibility to recruit, think of career opportunities, prioritize resources for excellence. And really, Kerstin, I think I now start to have a feeling that our old university system may not fit the role science is supposed to play today. And I think we should have a discussion on how to be able to organize for research with different aim and goals, and then see how this can be interacting. And not that one activity has a negative effect on the other, which I think we have a problem with today.
Thank you. Mia, you have the last words now before we go to lunch, so please.
So I'm still thinking about what was said about this, getting out of your comfort zone. And as a researcher, I think that I'm constantly pushing that. And perhaps that's something one should widen to the universities. Perhaps that's actually what we should be focusing on instead, how to get out of the comfort zone at the universities and how to dare selecting strong researchers or strong research environments and to really foster that.
And still focus on an environment for also a great research environment for many, as you said.
But not for all.
Not for all. So here we have a difference.
No, not at all. I totally agree.
You totally agree. But then we have a comment. That was what I thought you said, actually. So that was good. I like that as a last word of this panel. And I also like us to disagree, and that's fine. So let's have a further discussion during lunch. Now I have two, thank you, panel. I have two very important, a warm hand.